Welcome! In front of me I have the Samsung Galaxy S23, and today I'll show you a couple tweaks and tricks you can do on this device. So let's just get straight into it. So I'm going to begin with the dark mode and a couple of more simple ones, and then moving down the list that are going to get a little bit more interesting. So anyway, let's start off by opening up settings, and we're going to go to display. Here we have dark mode, so we have this light and the dark mode like you probably are used to. It's also visible when you're setting up the device, I believe, so you can just select it there, but what you couldn't select there is under here to have it enabled based on a sunset to sunrise or custom schedule. So right now it's already like almost 8 p.m, so it's automatically jumping to dark mode. Obviously I believe like at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. it switches back to light mode. So you basically have best of both worlds, because during the daytime in direct sunlight, I believe light mode is a little bit easier to see, while dark mode is significantly better for when you wake up, for instance at night, you want to check out your phone, and typically you just get flashbanged by it. So this will basically prevent that. Now, moving on to the next option is going to be the motion smoothness. So it's right over here. Now it is set to adaptive, which is the default one. But we also have a standard, which will cap the refresh rate of the display at 60 frames. We also have the animation right here to just kind of showcase what the difference is. So you can see that the standard one is a little bit like jumpy, stuttery. It doesn't look as nice as the adaptive one, which gives you this nice fluid motion. So that's basically the only difference right here. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this, even though it's set to something that is supposedly better, is because you might have better battery life on the standard one. Now, personally, I actually haven't tested it out all that much if it makes a huge difference. And I'm mentioning this because adaptive here, it doesn't really specify how low the refresh rate gets. I know for a fact that, for instance, on my Fold that I have, it drops to, I think it was 30 or 24 frames, something along those lines, while standard one will keep it always at 60. Here, if it's the same as on my device, then it would go from 120 frames to 24. So that's a massive drop down, lower than the standard. But the question is, will it give you a better battery life on a standard one or the adaptive one, which I guess is something that I would recommend checking out. Now, moving on to the next option, which is still under the display, it's going to be the screen mode. Now, by default, Samsung for some reason crams down everybody's throat the vivid one. I do understand that maybe it looks more appealing in like a line of phones, though personally I find Samsung's color or screen to be significantly oversaturated. So for instance, if you look right here, these oranges or oranges, whatever I'm already brain dead here, are a little bit too overdone. Or not a little bit, they're like stupidly overdone actually. So they're basically so vibrant that they look like they're glowing, which is not how oranges typically look like. So natural section right here will help that, making them look a little bit more realistic, toning down the colors to something more reasonable. Now we have a couple images right here. We also have the Aurora Borealis, which arguably looks better in vivid, but then I would say that a bunch of other things don't look all that good in vivid, so I prefer it in the natural myself, and then have a couple things just look a little bit more dull, like this, rather than having everything just kind of like aggressively be over colored. So that's just kind of one of my recommendations. Obviously, if you do like the vivid mode, then by all means stick with it. There's like no right or wrong answer here. It's just up to preference. I find it a little bit overdone, that's why I'm mentioning it right here. Now, moving on to the next option, it's going to be the gesture navigation that you can find right here. Also under the display, by scrolling down, you'll find navigation bar. And here you can select it to be swipe gestures. This will remove the buttons from the bottom and sub them for this bar that you can swipe up on to go home, swipe up and hold to go to recent, and swipe from either side to go back. Now there's also another option that you might be interested but might not, which is the gesture hints. When you turn that off, it removes this indicator from the bottom. Looks nicer, but it's absolute hot garbage. Let me explain. When you disable this, not only does it completely F up most of your launchers and even this one, it doesn't make it transparent. No, that would be actually smart. No, what it does is shifts it down. It, as far as I'm aware, it literally extends the aspect ratio of the display to be higher. So if this is, for instance, like 21:9, it becomes 22:9 or something like that. Now I'm pulling these numbers out of my 4 letters, but you get the point. It technically shifts it down, which because of that, it will cause some problems. Just because you don't see the display right here on like what it's below doesn't mean that apps don't think that you see it. And therefore, you will have some apps that kind of like cut into it. Settings isn't necessarily the best example because here you can see that this bar is actually a solid bar, like nothing phases through it. But in certain applications, it is transparent. And some apps will use that to their advantage. It's transparent, so they can still display things in this free space, which is fine. But when the app thinks that you still see it, and you only see, like, for instance, half the letters, like, for instance, this, because everything is shifted down outside of your view of the display, that's where the problems kind of start. And that's one of them. The other one is that you'll be probably swiping up multiple times on this before the phone decides to let you actually go home. Because why would the setting work like it's supposed to? So it looks nicer, but it basically brings a whole slew of problems to the table, which might not be something that you want to have to deal with, which is completely understandable. I personally wanted to use this because it just looks cleaner, but for the love of God, I couldn't get it to function correctly, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And honestly, for a flagship device like this one, or this one, you would expect that once you're paying $1,200 that everything works top notch. As considering other manufacturers like Realme, Oppo, Xiaomi, Huawei can do it correctly, but the top dog can't. It's embarrassing, to be honest. So I do sometimes come back, and I probably might recommend doing the same if you're interested in the setting. Maybe every time you get an update, just enable it, see if it maybe fixed the problem. I'm already on the 4th update. It still hasn't fixed the problem. Crossing my fingers that the next one will. But anyway, moving on to the next one. It's going to be the Fullscreen Apps, which I think is also somewhere in here. Yep, there we go, Fullscreen Apps, right over here. Now, it literally shows me nothing because there is nothing installed on this device, I think, apart from like this. But there are some apps that will appear in there, and you can enable them. Now, what I found useful, or this section useful for, is cloud streaming. So have been recently using a lot of NVIDIA GeForce now, and the way it works there is it would kind of create this bar right here. So where we have a status bar, it would cut off the streaming like any kind of other app, or not other, but like a bunch of apps. So just to try to find one that could do that. So for instance, right here, you can see that when you're scrolling up, it has this cutout and you have your status bar, which is fine. But when you're watching things like videos and you do the landscape mode, you don't see that. It kind of blends into it, and all you see is just a whole bunch of camera in your content, which is also fine. It gives you a wider field of view of the content that you're watching, which for cloud streaming, I found it to be annoying when I had this bar visible like this. When I don't need it, shouldn't have it. And enabling it, adding the application here to basically be forced in full screen. This will basically make it so the app is kind of acting like another, for instance, YouTube or video that would be playing. So it removes the bar, status bar, and just gives you a nicer view. And moving on to the next thing, and that will be the side key. Now I'm saying side key, and it's literally the hardest thing to say because it's a effing power key. Now, the reason I'm kind of like negative about this is because, just take that off. That's a side key, right? At least in idea of Samsung. So what the hell are these? They're also on the same side, just a little bit above. What's the difference? So yeah, I'm kind of negative about this because their stupidity, they try to remove the idea of a power key that has been ingrained in everybody, and everybody didn't mind it. It brought us functionality. Now, as you probably remember, Samsung tried to give us the specific button for Bixby, which people hated. So then they decided to, you know what, okay, you hate that button because you can't remap it, we're just gonna remap your power button. What? How high are you, Samsung? So yeah, here I'm gonna show you how to bring back the actual power button that everybody wants, and probably just a small percentage of people care to even try Bixby. So let's open up settings, and in here we're gonna scroll all the way down to what they classified as advanced features. Apparently power button is an advanced feature. And here you have a side key, aka the power button, which already is selected to be a power menu right now. Now by default it will be obviously Wake Bixby. Comically bad. So let's just switch it back to what it's supposed to be, what everybody has been using for decades and no one had ever problem with it, but Samsung decided to, you know what, let's change it. So you can get it back right here, and now when you hold your power button, you get this glorious power menu. You might not use it as often, but when you hold your power button, at least you get this instead of the annoying Bixby. I personally despise this, that's why I'm kind of ragging on this all that much. But now that I'm done, we can move on to a next thing, which is Game Launcher, which again is under the advanced features. Apparently Game Launcher and power buttons are advanced. God, Americans. Anyway, so in here you have the game launcher. So basically what it allows you to do is have a game launcher that you can assign games to, and when you're launching it, it gives just a little bit of a boost. Not that you would need it at the moment. After all, this processor right here is basically top of the top, apart from Apple. But still, whatever you throw at it in terms of like games on Android, there is nothing that this processor can't handle. So at the moment, Game Launcher is kind of useless in general. Maybe it would be useful for like blocking notifications, but you can also enable Do Not Disturb mode instead. But I also found it annoying when it would sometimes to launch when I was using cloud gaming, which I don't really need it when cloud gaming. It's cloud, so it's not like the device needs extra boost or extra anything else. It's basically only using processor and no GPU, so kind of useless to me. And obviously I don't really play games locally on my device, so I don't really care for that icon that is on the home screen, so I do tend to turn that off. Now obviously if you don't play games and anything like that, I can turn that off, no problem. Obviously if you want to later on, you can go back here, enable it, and you're good to go. No extra steps required. Now moving on to the next thing, it's going to be the motion and gestures, which actually were also here. So let's see if we can find it quickly. There we go, motion and gestures. And we have a bunch of things that are turned on by default. So if you don't like some of these features, for instance like the double tap to wake your screen, you can turn it off. Now we have two double tap to wake up the screen. One, not exactly sure how it works, considering it tells us one to turn on the screen when you double tap on it, and then we have double tap on an empty space on the home or lock screen, but it's to turn off. Never mind, so I'm just stupid. So let's see. There we go. So it does work. All right, I turned it off. Okay. So obviously there's certain settings that you might want to turn off or enable depending on what your preference is, so just go to them and select them to your liking. Now there's two last things that I want to touch upon. Number one, or second last I guess, is the haptic feedback. haptic feedback here is good. I have no problem with it. What I have a problem with is when you're paying for the device and Samsung just by default tries to limit it to preserve battery, as my presumption. I'm guessing, I could be incorrect, but at one point when haptic feedback came in, like got introduced, it was nice, strong, it felt responsive like it should. And nowadays the new Samsungs, even the Ultra, comes with a puny haptic feedback by default, so it just feels underwhelming and not like it should on a flagship device. Luckily, you can change that by going into sounds and vibration and into vibration intensity, and right here we have the system. By default it will be set to this. Absolutely atrocious. I recommend making it a little bit higher, and then when you're typing you will have that nice haptic feedback for every key press, which just adds, it doesn't make anything run better, but it just feels much better, and that's primarily what it is about. So I highly recommend checking it out. Obviously you don't need to max it out. Personally, I am keeping it on like the second last option. That's good for me. It provides a nice feedback while not being like super overpowering. But the default one that is somewhere along the lines of here or here, it's atrocious and it's just too low. And it wasn't like that before, so I highly recommend getting it back. You might have a little bit of a shorter battery life because of this. It's something that you might want to check out if you really care. But personally, the actual like feedback that it brings, the enjoyment of like just typing on the phone, is significantly better to me than having the phone last like 10 to half an hour longer. So yeah. And last thing that I wanted to show, also in sounds and vibration, at least I think, is the, where is it? Ah, there we go. So it's this one, sound quality and effects. Now it's one of those things that I actually won't be able to literally like showcase, just because it would be very, very difficult. So number one, you need headphones for this. So any kind of earbuds or anything like that will work. And I don't mean like from Samsung earbuds. You can have anybody's earbuds and this will work with any of them. So for instance, I have ones actually from Samsung, but like I said, that doesn't matter. I could connect them, and from there I can select equalizer, right? No, never mind. Oh, it's right here, adapt sound. There we go. Took me a moment to realize. And as you can see, we have a couple pre-made ones. So we have off, which is by default. Then we have under 30, 30 to 60, and 60 and over. What this refers to is obviously your age, or it says years old, right? And what the settings does is tailors the equalizer of the phone through your headphones to your specific hearing. Now, hopefully you are aware that with age, you obviously start to lose certain like hearing, so certain frequencies become a little bit harder to hear. What this setting aims to do is bring up these frequencies just so you can hear them again. So there is a little bit of a difference between off and under 30. It's not massive for me, so yeah, I can hear pretty well, and enabling that doesn't really do that much for me. But it might actually add some additional benefits if your headphones are a little bit of a lower quality, because what it does is it plays a series of sounds through the earphone. Now we do need to be in a really quiet environment, so controlled environment. Put your earbuds in and then select one of these, or what I recommend actually doing is to test my hearing, which like I said, we'll go through the playing of the different super faint sounds, a high pitch, a low pitch, and depending on if you can hear them or not, which you have to select, it will then tailor the equalizer to you, which obviously if you have like a little bit cheaper headphones, they might struggle in certain frequencies, for instance like bass production, and that will allow you to bring up a bass a little bit better through here instead of like having to crank it up in some application. This will feel much or sound much better in my opinion, which I did use this before on a cheaper headphones like way back, and it worked fantastically. Now like I said, using buds like this, I hear very little difference from going to off to under 30. That's still like, actually that's not I'm over 30 now, geez. But yeah, even like selecting them, I did go through all of them, but they in general had very little difference to me for like a better pair of earbuds, which leads me to believe it will work better if your earbuds are a little bit lower quality. Now, with this being said, this would conclude the tweaks, tricks, whatever you want to call them. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.